Office of Pest Management Task Force meeting February 15, 2012 at 10 o'clock.
There's parking on the west side of the Capitol, and there's parking just on the east side of 17th Avenue. It's like a block away, so you have to walk. But if you're parked in a spot that says you need a sticker and you don't have a sticker, you really do want to move your car because you'll get a ticket. And we're not going to make it right. We can't do it. It's the police, not us. So we can't validate a ticket. So we're waiting just a little bit. Shelley, where did you find the place to park?
On the street.
You're on the street, a little bit over here. Okay. There's another committee member that's on the way too. Company right there. Sold out. John Bolts. Dave Burns. Lynn Evans. Jimmy Fox. Jimmy Fox contacted me and said he would not be able to make the meeting today. Ken Frederick, here. Bill Hemminghouse. Yes. Will Rousseau. Kirk Smith. Here. Okay. And Will, as I stated, will be here shortly. We definitely have a forum. We can continue on. Start out as we always do if you're all here, so you're probably part of the listserv, but if you're not, please remind everybody here's the address for people to sign up for the listserv to be notified of the meetings and the papers and stuff that we're going to talk about. Changes, updates, other items out of the ordinary. Things have been going, I think, fairly smoothly. The only thing that we talked about at the advisory committee, Test Management Advisory Committee meeting was the fact that we have reduced the budget quite significantly, and there's money sitting there, and we need to be looking at that and determine whether we need to lower some fees, probably the TARP fee, to keep that in check so the legislature doesn't want to come in and take that away. So that's probably out of the ordinary. License renewal, Robert?
We have concluded the business and property party license renewal. So if your license has not been renewed as of yet, you will be starting over as a new applicant. And we are preparing the 2013 applicator license renewal applications to be going out for the last week of March.
And I think the words of wisdom that I learned this year is if you move, make sure you let us know, because we send it to your last known address. If you don't get it, that's not our fault. And we have people who have not renewed their license and they're pretty upset about it. But that's life. So just everybody keep that in mind as you're doing this. This is your profession. You need the license to do that. It's an important piece of paper. You need to keep track of that. So, item 3 on the agenda. At one of the previous meetings, Dave brought up the fact that ASBO is going to be holding some town hall meetings. There's been a couple of them, and so Courtney Linus is going to give us kind of an overview, an update on what came out of those meetings. So Courtney Linus is in front. So
Where do you want me?
what? I'm not quite sure what would be best. I want people to be able to hear you as well. So.
Kind of right here?
Just yeah, turn around right there. Yeah, that's
Okay.
good.
I'm pretty loud, so y'all should be able to hear me. Holler if you can't. Again, my name is Courtney Levinus. I represent the Arizona Pest Professionals Organization. And we are a statewide trade association. We represent about 100 members, and the organization was founded in 2004. I wanted to read you our mission real quick, just for some of you who may not be familiar with the organization. It is to serve as the voice of Arizona's pest control industry, protecting the livelihoods of pest management professionals while fostering education, promoting professionalism, raising ethical standards, enhancing environmental stewardship, improving public health, and the quality of life. The organization is open to pest management companies of all sizes. And we are affiliated with the National Pest Management Association. For more information on the organization, www.azppo.org. As Jack mentioned, we've had 2 town halls so far. We had one in December in Tempe on December the 14th, and we had about approximately 20 companies represented at that meeting. We had a second meeting in Tucson on January the 26th, and again, we had about 22 companies in attendance. We've also been conducting a virtual town hall through our AZPPO website, where we just send out questions as to things that are happening with the task force, and we've gotten online responses as well. I would like to know that the representation at the town hall meetings, I think, was a very good cross-section of the representation of the industry. Many small companies to medium to, our multinational companies were represented. Notices to both meetings were sent out via email. The first meeting included all of our members, past members, prospective members, but the second meeting in Tucson, we did send it out to additional emails from emails received through licensed applicators through OPM. I do want to thank Jack for attending the meetings and being there to give us a quick overview on the task force and what's happening. Dave Burns and Ken Frederick were also in attendance. We appreciate them taking the time out of their schedules to attend those meetings. We primarily covered 3 topics at the 2 town hall meetings. I'm sure it's no surprise to this group: the qualifying party, the background check, and the TARF fees. So we'll start off with the background checks. That was really the first item that we covered. There was not a whole lot of discussion on this particular subject because the task force had really already made a decision to possibly eliminate the background checks going forward once the merger is complete. There were a number of companies that indicated that they were already doing background checks because of the backlogs at DPS. And the sentiment, and this was just a general sentiment in the room, was from the industry, we'll probably be paying more for these background checks as it costs about $60 to $75 to do them in the marketplace versus $24 through DPS. But the time saving probably levels out the cost. So again, not 100% support for these changes as you would expect, but I would say a majority of the support. And then again, most of the time was spent on the qualifying party in both meetings. In general, there's support for keeping the qualifying party, and I want to be really clear on this point. In general, there's support of keeping the qualifying party, maybe not in the exact same format that we have it in right now. There were also attendees who supported the complete elimination of the qualifying party. And I would say in both meetings, probably a total of 3 to 5 attendees did support complete elimination of the qualifying party. Some of the comments included, if you have your qualifying party license, you probably shouldn't also have to have your applicator license. Kind of one and the same. Excuse me. And I don't want to be unclear on that. If you have your applicator's license, that's the same as qualifying party. It's the other way around. If you have your qualifying party, you shouldn't also have to have your applicator license. The 3,000 hours is difficult to determine and to verify. If you already have your qualifying party in one category, you shouldn't need additional 3,000 hours for each of the other categories. The task force should take into consideration the work experience, continuing education, and testing should be considered. There was a comment that if you have 5 years of experience as a qualifying party, you should be able to just test for the other categories without the additional 3,000 hours if you do have a good record with OPM. Some of our members would like consideration for reciprocity in other states for qualifying party. In Tucson, this came up substantially as an update of the test for qualifying party. We'd like to see sections of the test consider a written section, a tactical section, and oral portion. Again, going back to the 3,000 hours, the employer verification is difficult. We need to have other options available. And there was a general overall concern that reducing the qualifications for the qualifying party will reduce professionalism in the industry. And then as far as the chart fees, I think similar to what you've also heard here, that there's general agreement that the TAR fee should either be eliminated or at least reduced, that the termite industry should not be supporting OPM, that it should be shared industry-wide, but there is a use for the systems. Customers use it, realtors use it, our own members use it to provide information to their customers. Though the records are not always the most accurate, there is maybe data quality issues. There is concerns raised about the late fees, that the late fees are high. But again, valuable information to share for the industry. And then just to give you a quick summary, we do plan on holding additional town hall meetings as new issues come up with the task force. And then when we're ready, hopefully this summer, early fall, when we have a an outline to share with the industry, we will continue to hold task force meetings again in the Valley, Tucson, and then we've also considered maybe somewhere in northern Arizona as well, so we can reach some of those companies. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the town hall meetings.
Anybody have any questions? All right. I'm going to move to item number 4 then. And I just want to, you got notice fairly late that the agenda had been edited, and I put minor edits. And what I did is I wanted to make sure people were paying attention to the recommendations that we've already made so far. And so I actually reworded that first one because it wasn't clear. I mean, we had discussion internally, and we weren't all getting the same thing. And so I want to highlight no inactive license requirements. All licensees, whether active or inactive as it is considered now, have to maintain the CUs and pay the fees. That's what we would agree on. And that didn't say it that way. So, and the other two basically have stayed the same, so I don't need to repeat those. So we'll just move on down. Is the track of the agenda seem okay to everybody here? Okay. And Bill said he has to leave at 1 o'clock. So our plans are to be done by 1 o'clock. That's good. Yeah. Not far. Should I said earlier?
Yeah, like 11:30.
And you have the 11:30? No. Okay.
He's got no rest.
And we had the handouts and sitting out there on the table, and I'm glad to see that there's still some sitting out there. That means people are printing them off and looking at them beforehand, and that's great to continue to do that. I encourage you to please print them off and take a look at them and bring them in with you so you have an idea of what's being talked about in the meeting. So we're going to talk about the licensing requirements first and see if there's, I guess this would just kind of give a comparison. I think the comparison was to kind of see if there is a link between the QP and the custom applicator is kind of what we were talking about last time. And you've got the document, and so I'll just open it to discussion or questions or whatever people may have.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dave.
I'll start.
All right.
First of all, I'd like to thank the staff. They did a very good job.
Very good.
And it cleared a lot of things up for me, not knowing really the ag side and trying to read the law. Kudos to your crew. Now, I want to make sure I understand it before I make a comment that could be wrong. If I have a farm, I'm talking to the accent. If I have a farm and I have a bug on the farm, I'm going to call a pest control advisor to tell me what that bug is, and tell me what the recommendation is, and he's going to give me all of the things I need to know about the bug, and then he's going to recommend treatment procedure and a product. Am I correct on that? Then they're going to take that recommendation, they're going to hand it to a custom applicator who's going to.
Custom applicator.
If the custom applicator comes into the equation,
or the private applicator.
if you own the farm.
No. Well, yes. Well, yeah.
So you can only do it as a private applicator if you own the farm.
Right.
Otherwise, if you don't own the farm, you have to use a custom applicator.
If you own or operate the property, you can be a private applicator.
Okay. So the pest control advisor is going to hand this off either to the private applicator who most likely owns the farm, or the custom applicator who's being hired by the farm management.
Right.
To run.
That's right.
Okay. Cool. So the custom applicator really doesn't make any kind of decisions on what's going to be done on the farm. He's going to read a piece of paper that says, treat for this particular bug, spray this particular ethyl methyl bad shit at this rate, and then he fills out his 1080 form. The process is complete.
We have pretty that compound in a while.
So that's a good, and I'm trying to do, please understand, I'm trying to, the structural piece here, I'm trying to paint that picture.
John Bolts, I would qualify that with one thing, and that is both the pest control advisor and the applicator are both legally liable for what happens during that application. The pest control advisor to the extent of what he wrote on the recommendation.
Okay.
And the applicator for what he's doing there. So if wind is an issue, drift is an issue, whatever, potentially in a drift situation, PCA and applicator could both be drug in legally, but the applicator has an immense amount of responsibility to make sure it's done the way the PCA prescribed, to the letter of the law, and that it's carried out correctly, which is not too indifferent from what you guys are doing on the ground when you're doing applications around houses. So legal liability wise and responsibility wise.
John, Ken Credit, if the custom applicator determines there's too much wind, so there's a pest control advisor telling him instructions, this is what the law says or something. I mean, how much you say the custom applicator has all the responsibility?
The law is going to be up to 15 mile an hour with no drift. No drift is allowed. So no off-target drift. So in a wind situation, more than likely, applicator is going to say, I'm at the field, call the PCA. What are we going to do? How are we going to work this out? How do we modify what we have to do?
Two things, and I don't want to confuse this scenario because the other thing is a grower on his own property can do that 1080 as well for his own property.
Right.
Okay, so that just so people are aware of that. And the applicator is responsible to make that application legally as the PCA does. The PCA does not override label requirements. So if that applicator goes out there and label says, the PCA wrote down that it's supposed to rate three quarters of a pound, and the label says 3/8 of a pound, and he wrote it wrong. The applicator has to note that on the 1080 and do it according to that. And he would have contact with the PCA in all likelihood as well, but they're to note what has changed because, again, they are held responsible for making that application according to it.
Okay. All right. So then the scenario continues to be, we have a farm, we would use a pest control advisor who would basically diagnose the situation. The custom applicator then has the responsibility to do what's been told to him by the pest control advisor, and he too has licenses and things, so that it makes him responsible to make sure that, number one, the label is being followed, so that if he accidentally or inadvertently wrote 3/4 and it's 3/8, he should be the second part of that. Okay, so I'm pretty clear on it. Good. So then your requirements under ADA is to be a custom applicator, based on your form here. They have to fill out some paperwork, pay some fees, take some tests, much like our licensed applicator would do. they specifically cannot make pest control recommendations or claim to be a general advisor on any pest or pest condition. Have to have a PCA to make that recommendation. It says. Okay, so that's really the only requirement in that part.
John Boltzkin, I would qualify with that with one more thing. The grower also has some liability in the whole issue as well. All the growers are registered with the Department of Ag for the property that they're farming. And since the farmer normally hires the PCA and directly or indirectly, normally directly hires the applicator, even if the PCA is the one directing the work, the grower is still going to be liable in a lot of circumstances as it relates to most of what's going on out there as well. But I guess the only thing is, and maybe Jack can make it more clear, but like in you guys' business, you use a lot of non-restricted use pesticides. A lot of non-restricted use pesticides have general use requirements that can be used on the farm and can be used without a 1080 recommendation from the PCA. Roundup, some of these things, depending on your use and depending on how you're using it and what the legal requirements are, again, there's a myriad of different things, but an applicator, being private normally, could fulfill something on a crop or crop land that is much like what you guys do in your business, where it's non-restricted use and it's applied and it's just general use. Correct? I mean, am I characterizing that correctly? Yeah. So there are those differences.
Okay? So then your requirement under ADA to be a pest control advisor is you have to have a bachelor's degree in ag sciences, biological sciences, or pest management with 45 semester hours of college criteria, So you're making that pest control advisor a much higher responsibility or requirement to be responsible than you are a pest manager. Correct? Right. Okay, so we go from the farm. Right. We're going from the farm requiring a guy with a college degree to tell us what goes on, what bug problem we have and how we're going to fix that, to somebody who doesn't have to have those kinds of requirements, but does have to pass an exam and be responsible, be able to read a label to do the work. And again, I really am being simplistic, and I'm not trying to degrade that. I'm trying to get a real general concept so those people out there can understand what that means.
I think the difference that just to make sure everybody's clear on, for in the agriculture situation, if it's not a restricted use pesticide, they don't have to be certified. They don't have to take an exam. Okay? If it's not restricted, if it's not an applicator, the custom applicator does, yes. But if it's a private applicator on his own farm, he can make an application of a non-restricted use pesticide without going through any testing.
Right. So let me make sure that I clarify that correctly. If you're going to do it for pay, you got to follow these rules. If you own it, you got another set of rules. That are a little less.
Yes.
It's your property, you kind of do what you want within certain reasons. I'm by that.
Did you have a question? Please finish your thought.
Okay. All right, so we have the farm. We're going to pay somebody. I'll clarify that. We're going to pay somebody. A person with a degree's got to figure out what bug is. Going to lay out a plan. Got to hand it off to somebody who doesn't have that requirement, but does have some licensing requirements to do it. Some paperwork's completed. That's the process in a nutshell. Okay. Let me move that over to structural. So instead of a farm, we have a building. Could be a hospital, could be a school, could be a house. Somebody's going to pay us to do work there. Somebody has to be responsible for the identification of the pest that we're going to deal with. If they're not physically looking at it, they do have to take the responsibility of training, equipping, and managing the person that is going to do that. But ultimately, the qualified party is that person. Then he hands off that recommendation, that standard, that company position to an applicator who actually goes out, verifies what maybe has been said or has a standard from the company that says you're going to do X, Y, and Z if the pest is a German cockroach or a bed bug. And he says, yes, I'm licensed too, so I'm verifying all the other things that came out of the company side of it, and I'm now going to apply this product that my qualifying party says, if you have cockroaches, we're going to use this product. That's my company standard. If you have bed bugs, we're going to do this procedure. Applicator is the guy that does that.
Based on the QP's either direct involvement or just a policy that the QP has set that fits that criteria.
Well, understand the basic requirements for a QP is to train, equip, and supervise.
Right.
So if Ken works for me, and I'm the QP, my responsibility is to train, equip, and supervise. So I'm going to train him. I might train him to do identification. I might decide to do it myself. That's a business decision.
Besides your company.
Yeah, it's a business decision, but bottom line is, me as a QP, I'm responsible for what? If I give that task to Ken, I'm responsible for what he says, because it's my responsibility to train, equip, and supervise. So I'm that guy. I am, again, simplistic model. As the QP, I am the PCA. I'm handing those things off to a custom applicator to do, to physically spray the nozzle.
Not a direct, John Bull, it's not a direct comparison because the PCA may direct some of the aspects of the applicator, but it's still up to the applicator to make sure it happens right. So there normally is a clear separation, even if they're working for the same company. The PCA may set out direction, but I would never hire a PCA or know a PCA that would do work on my property, that would write a rec sight unseen, or that would rely on an applicator to make a really, a judgment call that would go into the right direction.
Well, so I take it, it's a good point, and I'd take it one step further. We don't use custom applicators, really haven't for years, but I'm not aware of a situation where a custom applicator would make any kind of judgment call in agriculture. They're going to take the PCA. Well,
yeah, I do understand that.
It's different.
I do understand. There is differentiation. I'm not trying to make it clear cut. I'm just trying to get general ideas so that people can see we're probably really not very far off as far as the way things line up. A qualifying party has the responsibility to train, equip, and supervise, which in that is either physically doing the identification himself or training another individual in his company to do it, depending on how you want to run your business. That's the ability to do. Ultimately, after that, you're setting either a recommendation or a standard that says, if on the building I have a cockroach problem, we're going to use these products in my company. Now I hand that to my applicator and I say, your job is to go do that job now, based upon what those standards are. Again, much like what your custom applicator is being given as directed from a pest control advisor. Done, job's finished, paperwork's processed, and we all have our specific ways of keeping paperwork. So in general, again, very simplistic, and I'm not trying to degrade in either side here. We are very much alike in what we do right now. It just has some different terminologies for people. And I think this paper was pretty clear on it. So that was my comment.
Can I interject one more thing, Jeff? John Bolts. One other point to mention, because you brought it up a couple times, and obviously for historical perspective, 6-7 years ago, there was a revamping on the ag side. Is that about right?
PCA stuff?
Yeah, for the PCA stuff. And we upped all the hours of CEUs that were required. It used to be kind of 6 for everything just about. And now PCAs and applicators are required to hold more. And they've changed a lot of other things that are nuances. But one thing that did change that was profound, and it's worth mentioning, is that the PCA is now required to have these requirements as outlined as far as education. whether it be baccalaureate or so many credit hours in a certain area. And that was a change. In the past, that wasn't a requirement. You were simply required to pass the core and an exam in each of the areas where you might write a recommendation. And that changed a couple years ago. There are a lot of people in the ag sector that are grandfathered in that are still writing recommendations, myself being one of them, that would not fit that criteria for relicense today. But being that I still hold a license, I can still continue to do that if I chose to. And those folks are just as professional as anybody in the business. It's just that going forward, that was one of the things that ADA and the industry thought was wise, and everybody was, for the most part, on board.
Yeah. And I was going to say that actually was an industry-driven thing. We didn't oppose it by any means, but it was an industry thing to look at. They were looking at their industry to ensure. I think they wanted it was a profession. And they wanted to make sure people that were in this industry were professionals. So.
And I can appreciate that, and I think what's always telling me is the degree historically wasn't really a driving factor. Today you use the degree as a management tool that says you need that in order to do that, because we've determined, or agriculture has determined that should be a minimum standard. But historically, we've seen a lot of guys who are really good PCAs that don't have it. Okay, and I think from a QP standpoint, we are looking hopefully to do the same thing, set some kind of a standard that's reasonable, but I promise you there's a lot of people out here that are QPs that don't have degrees that are very good QPs. They know how to run a business, they know how to manage, train, and equip people. So, again, my nutshell, we're really not very different.
Further, I understand the PCA. I'm still a bit confused on the difference between the commercial and the custom applicator. In order to be a custom applicator, you have to have a commercial applicator license, but not the other way around.
It's a commercial applicator is the guy who sprays it. The custom applicator is a business license.
Okay. All right. So it's okay.
An individual that operates the business holds that custom applicator license. And he may have a number of commercial applicator licensed individuals, because a commercial applicator license is an individually held license. That I can take my commercial applicator and go work for whoever as a commercial applicator.
Okay. So in a sense, you could have a company that does everything. You would hire somebody from then they identify the heads, they make the recommendations, they make the application, they do the whole nine. They would need all three licensing or licensure.
There used to be more people in ag that were just applicators and independent PCAs, but at different times you see them merging and depending on the business.
All right. In the area. That's true of you, but it's not true anywhere else.
Well, in California, you go to Rio Valley, you have some guys that are, it's Dune Company or crop production, and then you have all these independent guys, so, and applicators.
This Henry raising his hand reminded me of, again, everybody signed in downstairs, and so if we had a fire alarm go off, please don't everybody run off. We need to check you out here, because if you run off, you got to send the fire department in here to look for you. If the building's burning down, that's not a good thing. Bathrooms, just down the hallway to the right by the elevator. Just go out the door to the left, and the bathrooms are on the right. And I'm going to talk to these folks before I talk to anybody in the audience. I'm not trying to be rude, but these folks are on the task force, and that's why they're here. So I just want everybody to realize that I'm not ignoring anybody, but I'm going to talk to these guys first. With that, anything else on that? If not, I'm going to go to Henry.
Yeah, my objective was just make sure that I'm clear on your side and that I explain our side pretty clear and that we're somewhere in the middle.
Okay. Okay, Henry?
Henry Schneiter, International Accommodations. John, did I understand your comment correctly that if I'm going to spray unrestricted chemicals, that I don't actually have to talk to the PCA first? I can just go out and do my own prescription and apply them myself?
In most cases, depending on the law, am I categorizing that correctly? The difference is that no one else owns or is renting that property at that particular time or lives there.
So does that only apply to the private applicator, or does that also apply to the commercial applicator?
You don't, the license is irrelevant in that circumstance. If you're working for the specific farmer, let's say I work for Will and I was on his farm, I could go spray Roundup or a myriad of other non-restricted use pesticides on his property. But ultimately, Will's responsible for that.
Right.
And I doubt Will would have me do that if he had 20 people living there and have me go out and spray the grass there, unless he knew for sure. I mean, that, I guess that's, I know what parallel you're trying to draw, and there is a distinct difference, I think, in there. So I guess to answer your question, that's the direct answer, but I think ag would look at that differently in the circumstance that, say, don't have much of it anymore, but in ag, you used to have a lot of housing. You provide housing for guys that lived on your farm, and a farmer, I'd say, would certainly handle that differently if they're looking at, say, an area where they have 10 houses for employees to live or whatever. So, because they're not direct family members, they're not that sort of thing. So, I guess I know where you're going with that comparison, so that's why I make that caveat.
Right. Well, you can understand the farmer wants to be careful with his hired help and doesn't want to make his employees sick because maybe they're going out in the field or maybe he's overspraying onto the residences, and you certainly would like to avoid anything along those lines.
Well, I think there could be some real legal ramifications because he ostensibly has tenants there, even if they work for you or not. Whether they work for you or not.
Right.
Certainly none of the kids or wives, in most cases, the wives and kids don't work for it. So, I mean, and making people sick is obviously paramount. There's lots of things to be considered.
Right. And then to go back to what David Burns said last month, 99.9% of all the applications are done by an applicator with no reference to a QP. That applicator is expected to have the knowledge independent of anybody else, so that he can go out there. That's exactly what you said.
That is not correct.
You can go watch it. You can go watch it on the video.
Henry, that's not correct.
Come on.
I didn't say that they don't have. They do have responsibility to the QP. And so that's an unfair statement.
I didn't say they didn't have responsibility. The applicator always has responsibility.
Okay.
I was just in a reference to what you were saying. In our business, if you will, you don't need a license to apply pesticides to property that you own. You step beyond that boundary, you need a license.
Yeah. The only thing they need a grower permit.
Okay.
They need a grower permit,
Right.
which basically is that shows that they're an establishment that will use pesticides. But other than that, if it's not restricted use pesticide, I don't know.
Smith, if you don't mind, could you repeat that a little bit louder? It's hard for us, the fan, to hear.
Well, I know this has been an issue in the past. My understanding of the construction side of the business is that if I'm an individual owner, I don't need a license to apply a pesticide on property that I own and occupy. But if I own an apartment complex, I don't have the right to treat that as a complex where I got to occupy every unit. I need a license to do that.
Did you have a question?
That covered it right there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so there's some similarities between these, you know, and there's nuances with everything, but I appreciate you doing that, Dave, because it actually helped me to look at it that way as well. So we've talked about that, and I guess this will move us into the next discussion, I think, with that of the qualifying parties, which is initial qualifying party license requirements. Does that seem land right to me? Yes, or does it?
This one here?
Correct.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. And everybody have that one?
Got it.
Okay. Yes, that's it. You got it? Okay. All right. And so we've laid out potential options here and realize these could be modified. This is kind of the language that, you know, you would ask, well, and we put something together with language to how we could really do this, and this is how we did it. and realize we can modify, you can modify time frames, you can modify, we can put combinations of things from above to below and all that kind of stuff as well. So these are just the way we laid them out for discussion purposes. And again, what we did is we looked at certain categories we believe posed a greater risk. And so that was these first categories that we listed here. Okay? That's B1, 2, 4, and 9. And I say pose a greater risk, or in my mind also have the greater potential for consumer ripoff. And so for those first categories, we had, that you go through, you get certified for 24 months. You go after you've been there for 2 years, you could go and you could take the exam and you could become a QP. Okay, that was, or then you go into the second one, which you provide that you've been in the business. You've been certified for 12 months, and then you have 12 semester hours in certain areas.
You define certified, just certified applicator?
We're looking, certified applicator. We're going to move the change the language nomenclature to certification, which is what the EPA recognizes, and that's what we're going to use as certification.
So certified applicator.
Certified applicator, correct.
That's the guy that's working for.
Yes.
Actually do.
Yes. So this is in order to get a QP. Yes. Okay.
So that's what they're going to limit. Sorry. This is what they're going to, this is the certified for 24 months. They're going to be 24-month applicator. Not as a warehouse guy, not as...
You know what? All we know is they are a certified person.
They passed the test.
They passed the test. They can sit in a warehouse. They could be the office help. That's been that's been the ongoing issue of trying to get prior employees to step up for an employee who's doing this, having them to come forward to us and review this stuff. And again, if we're looking at reducing, this makes it black and white. You've been certified for 24 months.
As an
applicator. And you guys can disagree. I'm just telling you I'm trying to make it.
I can't see the scenario, Ken, where many people are going to get a certification for 24 months and not use it.
Well, I think so, yeah.
I can't see it happening very often.
Okay, Dave?
Dave Burns. At first I read this and I kind of was like, wait, what stops a guy from just taking the test and, sitting 24 months and then coming back and saying, okay, I'm qualified for a QP. That didn't sit very well with me at first, and then I thought a little bit about it, and I kind of mulled it around. I think the key to this, I'm okay with the 24-month thing. I think it's easy for you guys to identify. It reciprocates to other states. It's pretty simple. I'm good with that part. I think the key is how you test. If you make a test that tests practical knowledge that you're going to get out working for a company, then I'm really good with that. If the test is, a 5-question, multiple choice with 2 true or false, that's probably a little tougher. And I would use this scenario, and I'm going to use Vince because I like it. You have a QP. If Vince doesn't have a QP, you have not spent a lot of time out in the industry behind the end of the hose, have you? No. But I challenge you to tell me why Vince wouldn't make a good QP. He knows the laws. He obviously in his job knows how to supervise and manage people. He can read. He drafts things eloquently. Why should he not be a QP? Just because he doesn't have the hose end of the business. He's smart enough to do it. Just test it.
The gentleman there in the blue shirt, could you please stand up and speak loudly? Not you.
This is the blue shirt. That looks green to me.
Almost like black and green. Sorry about that.
Norman Conley. The question I have is, what are you going to do about the individual who is a licensed applicator, or in your terminology, a certified applicator in, say, 4 categories? Is he still going to be able to use that 24 months within the 5 years, or is he going to be required 24 months for category A, 24 months for category B, C, and D, and he's not going to get it in 5 years?
So for B1, B2, B4, or B9, those 4 categories, they have to be certified in those categories for 24 months. So if they went and tested and got all those categories, in theory they would have to have 2 years of experience or 24 months of experience in each one of those. So it could be concurrent, yes.
So you're going to allow the time frames to overlap, I guess is the question.
Yes.
Okay, no problem. I just wanted to make sure that I understood. There are a lot of people in this industry that are certified in 3 or 4, in my case, 5 categories. At one time, I was in all of them.
Yes. Chris Miller with the Beekeeper Total Bee Control. I think the assumption that someone who's certified for 24 months will actually have 24 months of experience, I think is just an assumption. I can speak from experience as a business owner in this industry for about 12 years that I hire people and they may stay with us for 3 months during our busy season, or they may choose to leave our employment and never work in the industry again. And then in that scenario, they could have 24 months as a certified applicator with little or no experience because they may not have taken employment as an applicator subsequent to getting their license.
And that's correct. I make no bones about it. But I think that you got to go back to what Dave said, and there was more feedback on that in Tucson than we had at the meeting in Phoenix. But talking about the exam and the fact that the people weren't happy with the QP exam. They thought it was just maybe a few more questions than the applicator exam, and so we need to look at the quality of the exams as well. I mean, I was qualified. Realize we're government, so things don't happen overnight, but this is where we're going. So that would be part of this whole process.
Right.
I understand that.
Right. We used to have a 7-part exam back when I took the test. Now it's a 2-part exam, and I did retake it 2 years ago, and it was extremely easy.
It was what?
It was very easy to pass.
Okay. Now we have the two gentlemen and then the lady here. So we'll go ahead.
Kelly Day, Metro Institute. I was thinking perhaps the CEU requirement could be raised for that during the 24 months. If somebody's not actually applying, at least if they're required to receive continuing education, maybe even at a greater rate than it is now, that would at least help ensure that they're gaining knowledge during that time when they're out of state or not in the industry.
And I'll just comment, this was interesting because in Tucson, I actually heard some complaints about the CU saying that they're the same, and I encourage people to attend different courses. They go to the same course every year, and they're going, I'm seeing the same thing, and we'll go to a different course, different providers. So go ahead, gentleman in blue shirt.
My name's Ron Elkins, and I kind of have a little problem with, we use the example of Vince, and I really like you, Vince. I've worked with him a lot, but part of the problem I see with that is, yes, he knows all the laws and he knows how that all works, but he doesn't have any time behind the hose. And that's where the problems really exist, is when you're out there with the consumer, something happens. That's when the QP needs to step in and sort things out. That's why there's a joint responsibility and whatnot. I understand knowing what the laws are, knowing how to apply, yes, but being out there and actually applying your experience is a whole different thing than learning it in a book.
I just want to comment to, I'm sorry, I didn't hear your name.
Ron Elkins.
Ron. I just want to comment to Ron. He's right. But the problem we have is it's very difficult to, number one, Just because he works for a company doesn't mean he's well trained. He might work for a company that is very well trained. That's the thing that's an unknown out there. You can have training that's really good and training that's not so good. We all know that. That's where I think testing is the key. I believe we can write a test that will be something that challenges their ability to think in the field that they would normally gain that knowledge through experience. If he's a really smart guy and can figure it out, he should be able to do that. If he's not a really, if it's me and I'm not a really smart guy and I can't figure it out, then I might need that experience in order to get my license. I might need somebody to physically teach me that week in and week out for 24 months because I'm not a bright guy.
I do agree with Dave. I was on the committee that helped rewrite the last revision of the exams. And in my opinion, the QP exams, most of them are extremely easy. To me, they're probably more of a license applicator type exam. But I would like to see the exam, one of the major part of this, like David said, rewrite it so that it's reflective of your experiences in the field. You know exactly what's going to be required to perform that job. Whether it's pesticide related, pest related, whatever, supervised by you. That should be one way to get it.
Do we have, just so everybody knows, what is the current passing rate of the QP exam?
It's about 64%.
So, I mean, just so everybody keeps that in perspective, we have the smart people all come to these meetings. I understand that. So just realize that there's it's only 64% of the people are passing right now. So it's
Except for Dave.
Yeah, I'm the first one. He's grandfathered in.
So go back to the gentleman, blue shirt, last comment. We need to move on.
You guys are absolutely right. Making those controls more stringent in the testing, that's very advisable. I'd just like to say though, right now, I've worked with several businesses to get them to the point where they can get their own QP. And one of the things that I do with them is they have to document every single hour that they spend working through pest control underneath me, and I sign off on those things. I take accountability for that, but in the same note, they have to go through everything from learning the business to learning how to remedy things. That's one of those things. I don't know if it's required in the industry, but that's what I require the people that I work with. That also would keep people from just sitting on a couch waiting 24 months and coming in and taking this exam. That practical field experience, you just can't test that.
Okay, thank you.
My name's Shannon Hubbard. I'm a licensed realtor. My husband is a home inspector who's also licensed to do termite inspections. And I say this at the risk of sounding a little too simplistic, but I believe the goal here is if you have a bug, you want to identify it, A, and B, kill it. And with all of these rules, I know my husband as a home inspector has one license and one license for the company. It costs him a total of $85 a year. As a realtor, I pay $60 a year to renew my license. As a termite inspector, just to add a $40 service to an already $400 service, it costs him $400 to $500 a year, not to mention TARP fees, which because of that and because of the late fee that penalizes the small business owner, he's actually stopped doing termite inspections to the detriment of his clients and the realtors that he serves because he was paying more for TARP fees than our office mortgage costs per month. And I know the goal here is supposed to be consumer protection, and I'd just like to suggest to you that through all of the ridiculousness of the rules to have 4 licenses to do a termite inspection, not counting treatments, just to do an inspection, he's going to have 4 licenses, 2 applicator licenses, a firm license, and a QP. And that's for a one-man operation. I'd suggest to you that a large percentage of the industry is 1 to 2-man operations. And by the ridiculousness of the rules, the regulations, and the fees, you're not only hurting the consumer by eliminating competition, but you're increasing their costs. And to do that in the name of, protecting the consumer, you're hurting the very consumer that you exist to protect. And I'd just like to suggest to you that you also not only look at other states, which I read you were doing as far as TARP fees and licensing fees, look within this state. It costs $65 a year to be an architect. I guarantee you architects make more than a termite inspector. It costs $65 a year to be an engineer.
where's the fairness? Where's the sense of reality? And I see where the cost comes from. It's the ridiculousness of the bureaucracy and the rules, very expensive to the consumer and to the professional who's trying to earn a living and feed his family. And as a result, many of those little guys can't be here today.
Thank you. Thank you. What's your name?
Shannon Hubbard. My husband's getting audited now.
We all are.
Kirk Smith. The first thing that you put together, Jack, I like a lot. My only concern is in your categories, B3 which is herbicide, B5 is turf and ornamental, is bringing it down to 6 months. The only reason I question that is in the turf and ornamental side of the business, oftentimes we're talking about fungicides, we're talking about viral side, we're talking about nematicide. In the herbicide business, we're talking about weed killer. If you look at the label, a lot of the label restrictions are highly restricted because of the increased toxicity of a lot of the products. I don't necessarily think of those as being a safer form of a pesticide compared to what we use in the contract. You got a lot more restricted use products, especially with nematicides and some herbicides. Your toxicity classes are higher than your general pest control products. So I don't know if I agree with bringing this down to 6 months instead of 24 months in the season, something like that.
Is that where you're using those products? Is that golf courses?
We got golf courses, city parks, school grounds. We've got a lot of people being exposed to these products.
Like I said. Go ahead, John.
Well, I agree completely with that for 2 points. One is from the issue, not a year goes by that we don't hear about somebody applying on state right-of-ways that affects ag from a drift standpoint. And I know you guys deal with that often from the Department of Ag side and whatnot. And it just, to me, the other aspect is the confusing aspect of it in that, let's take termite inspection, for example, and albeit from the outside of business looking in, more from a customer standpoint, I'd like somebody inspecting for termites that's probably a similar caliber of somebody that can find them and kill them too. I mean, I don't understand. Maybe what I'm not understanding about the business is that that's an entry level type thing, but I would think being a termite inspector, you have to have a pretty darn good knowledge of how termites work and that sort of thing, and we're just going inside. So anyways, for my part, I don't see the real benefit in having the 2 categories for those 3, or having the 2 different qualifications for those 3 separate.
Gotta go to Will.
Okay. I actually do see the difference. Honestly, I kind of came into this wondering why we needed a QP, period. Heard a lot of comments from folks, and so I've come around that I am with the thought that you're applying restricted use compounds in homes, schools, buildings. Yeah, I mean, so I see the need for that. Honestly, I'm not sure for the other categories I see the need for a QP. And so given that, and this is just me, given that, belief, I'm all for lessening the qualifications to have a QP. Because one of the overarching comments as we started this was that the requirements to be a QP were a barrier to entry into the business. And I think this approach goes plenty far to eliminating that or mitigating that criticism of the process, and yet maintaining the safeguards that I've heard a lot of people talk about that I think are valid.
Kind of have a comment question that goes along with that B3, B5. I know a lot of the issues come from golf course people on that. And is there another way that we might be able to separate golf course people more on the lines of they grow grass, you can have them in agriculture, or it's property which they own and occupy, which I think probably leads into, I know there's a lot of people on it. It leads into I think a different business model than structural tests. So that's one phase that I think might ease a lot of the complexity of this. The second part, I don't disagree that there's a lot of different products in those two categories. But I think if you're in the landscape business, if you, again, I go back to testing. If you've got experience as a business owner and you're running a business, you've got the appropriate insurances and all those kinds of things. We should be able to develop a test that tests that guy's knowledge and ability, so that based upon some minimal amount of verifiable experience, and I think that's what you're saying with 24 months, we can verify that, and it is some form of experience. You're taking a test, you're reading a label, you're telling us, I know some of these basic things. Again, how much time I spent on the back of a hose, that's a tough thing to measure. But I'm not sure why we can't do that same thing there again with the proper testing. The third thing, I never really have been a fan of separating the two termite categories of feeding and just really don't know what the purpose is. Because again, I believe when the consumer deals with termites, they are looking for the guy says, you have them, and here's how you fix them. And here's the cost to fix them. I can go get other I do whatever I want. But I think the consumer is looking for that one thing. And the part I would tell you about inspections is a home inspection. You want to know the requirements for a home inspector right now. They're pretty stupid. A home inspector provides a home inspection for a consumer. We don't provide WDIs for consumers. They're a secondary thing.
I'm sorry, what's a WDI?
A wood destroying insect report, a termite inspection of the complex. We don't provide that for the consumer. We provide that for a mortgage company. A person that is putting a lot of money out on guaranteeing or financing a loan, that's who we do that for. It's not the consumer is the secondary benefit when you talk about a real estate transaction with a WDI. All of them go to their realtor or their mortgage company, their title company, whatever. We'll give them a list. You need to have these things done. And you know what? Very rarely will they ever say, as the mortgage company, I want you to do a home inspection. It's rare. It happens sometimes, but it's rare. They will almost always tell you you have to have a termite report done, and it has to be clear and clean. Otherwise, we're not going to fund this loan.
Yeah, Kurt first, and then just following these ones. Okay, he made my time. Okay.
And I would prefer you guys to agree, because you're in that business, but I do see the validity in separating them based on the lady's comments. I've bought and sold a number of homes, and we've had lots of people, every one of them has been inspected for termites, and with all due respect, I never listened to the recommendation that the inspector gave me. Their job is to determine are they present or not. And then once that's done, then it's up to me, or the mortgage holder to seek treatment.
And I agree.
Yeah.
But you're the secondary beneficiary of that. You're having it done because your mortgage company's telling you.
I think it's my house, so it's a primary.
Well, you're getting the benefit, but it's not like you have a choice in that. You're not going to say, you know what, I don't want to have a termite inspection. The mortgage company's going to tell you you have to have it.
But David, it goes back to the barriers of entry. And if you're not prescribing any application or directing the homeowner in any way, your sole role is to determine their presence or not, then that's a lower threshold, in my opinion, than making the application.
John Bolts, the idea that a homeowner is secondary in receiving those services, I think, is a little bit naive from the standpoint that the whole point in a homeowner buying a home is to build equity and eventually own that home. I mean, that's lost in our, on a lot of people these days. It's just like having a mortgage runs the mill for everybody. But if we get back to the whole purpose of trying to own the home, there's not such a bank can own property too. Just because the bank is wiser about how they spend their money than a lot of people are, as far as more discriminating or whatever. But I would say that not only does the report need to be stored and available in a way that makes sense to a lending institution as well as a homeowner, because maybe you don't have an issue for a number of years, but as a homeowner, you're interested to know what's happening. And at the state, if we're paying to have a system, it should be accessible to people and easy to read, and the course of collecting the data and presenting the data to whether it's the home lending industry or individuals, it should be straightforward enough that if a person is a prospective buyer of a property, whether it be a home or a structure or whatever, they should be able to look up that address and be able to query that information as research on looking at property as well. So, I mean, so it has value to people beyond just a lending institution.
No, exactly. Please, well, it wasn't my intent to say that it didn't have value. It does have value. It's just the instigator or the initiator in that particular instance is always going to be the mortgage company. They are going to require that for the sale. Now, do you get benefit from it? Absolutely, you do. You get benefit from a good report. And that could benefit you long term for many years to come. I don't disagree with that. I was just making a point on who originates the need or demand for that report, and it is the mortgage.
I'm going to go to Harvey. I'm going to go to Harvey, and then I'll go to Will. I want to say something about this as well.
Okay, I'm Harvey Logan, Western Exterminator Company. Western Exterminator Company. I agree with Dave that I think the two should be put together, the inspector and the trader. And my question is, if you were to separate them, who's responsible for a warranty of the work? The guy that does a bad inspection or the one that does a bad treatment? I mean, so I really believe that the two should be lumped together and in that one category, whichever it is, A or 2, whatever. But,
finish your thought.
I think it would be very dangerous to separate these.
I guess, and the reason I wanted to say something is because with what you said previously, and which is going to kind of mess this stuff up a little bit again, is I'm wanting to move our categories to be similar to what the feds are. And right now, they don't have right-of-way and weed management. They have right-of-way. They have turf and ornamental. And so in my mind, we need to start going that direction. And so going to and I'm going to bring up a discussion topic that isn't popular, but there's two things. There's one thing that her husband does or doesn't do anymore because he doesn't charge his customers for it. I think he charges for it, he covers costs, but he doesn't. So, when you're selling a home, they have to have an inspection. You don't have to have a treatment. I mean, if they're going to have a treatment, then when you guys are going to come in, you're going to do an inspection and then you're going to do treatment, right? So we talked about this internally, and these guys that are home inspectors are licensed under the BTR, your Board of Technical Review, Technical Registration. In my mind, I'm looking at it going, why are we even looking at those guys? If they're just going in and doing an inspection, they should be covered under them. And I know this is not what a popular message to everybody here is, but in my mind, from a practical point of view, it seems like those guys are doing this and not doing pesticides inspections. They're going through an inspection, they're going to sell a house. If you're going to go in there and you're going to do a treatment on a house or determine whether treatment is needed, you need to be licensed by us. That's the way it's simplistically in my mind. And I know this so, okay, Jack.
Jack McClure. The reason, there were two different distinct reasons in the past for separating the license categories. One is during the heyday of construction, there was a massive amount of termite pre-treating going on, and somebody had to be trained to establish a barrier and do measurements and calculations and inspections were not required at all. Just simply a treatment. The other thing that happened years ago is that we had a large number of companies that were in significant and serious problems from doing inadequate work. And the degree was so significant of the problems that we had that the Structural Pest Control Commission would take a portion of the business's license categories, the inspection, bidding, and selling of the work, and left them with a treatment license so that they could make up for the screwed up work that they did, and yet they weren't allowed to sell more work until a certain time had passed. So when we go back historically, those were the only two reasons that the license categories were separated. In my opinion, I'd like to see the licenses as one license and a person trained all the way across for everything. But that's not really the issue. The issue is the problems of the past have been huge. They have been immense. We've seen class action lawsuits and individual lawsuits that were beyond the realm of imagination. And the public needs to be protected, and the industry needs to be protected, in which high standards are maintained, so that we can conduct ourselves in a good and professional management way. So, if you got any questions, I can talk to you historically.
And Dave, I want to just ask a question too when you're speaking, if you will. What does that, I know government affects your industries, and so what does that do to you? What I said, what does that do to you guys?
Well, I'll try to answer. I'll give you my opinion. But first, I wanted to tell you why I made that mention. Because I do believe, along the same lines as you, I think we need to simplify.
Yep. And I actually agree with that.
And I only look at that saying, that's the easy thing to simplify. It really is. It's just a simpler way to
merge the two licenses.
I think that your question was how does that affect industry?
Yeah.
I think that our industry, I think that you normally will see companies have both licenses. There are a few, and I would be concerned about blanket removing WDI work out of pest control and putting it at BTR. You will essentially probably put companies out of business, because there are companies that do just that kind of work, and they tend to be very small, mom and pop, family run.
Do they tend to be doing the inspection and then doing the treatment?
No, they don't. I'm not going to say there's a lot, but there are companies that they specialize in doing WDI inspections.
Do they license to BTR also?
No, they just do termite inspections, and they're licensed through here.
And that's kind of what I was trying to clarify. And I'm not sure that I was wanting to say that you couldn't do that. I was just trying to say if people are just doing that, why can't they be covered under BTR? And why do they have to be covered by BTR and covered by us?
Why not create two different? Why not create kind of BTR license that does this, and then whatever's remaining out of that, combine it to my licensing?
Yeah, well,
I think probably the inherent problem I see with that right off the bat is the form that we sign is a federal form, and it says specific things like it'll be filled out by a licensed pest control company. It's a federal form.
The form for the inspection?
Yeah, HUD designates that form for us. So it's a federal form. It's not a state form. But the other side of it is, I think that by having this other category, now from an industry standpoint, we're having to certify our people in two different areas when they're really doing one job. So if we go out and treat a home, the person that would have to come back and treat it, the person that treats it has one certification. the person that does the inspection has another, when in reality, if it was one, that one guy does all things. That's just my opinion. Trying to answer.
Well, and again, I don't do that for a living, but that's contrary to my experience. It's almost always somebody comes and inspects it and gives you part of the escrow.
That's what you own. That was part of the home inspection.
Yeah, but it's never that's contrary. I'm not disagreeing with you, but that's just contrary to my limited experience. But I think you're mixing up, at least you're confusing me when you're talking about applicators, your applicators. We're talking about the QP here.
Yeah, we kind of dove off. I brought that up. Again, I brought that up just because I felt that from an efficiency standpoint, I'm not sure that industry-wise we really need that B8 category. I think it could be done in B2 and it can be done.
And you're right, actually. Well, thank you. I did. I drove us off here a little bit, but I think that the applicator, just from her situation, related into this, and that's kind of why I keep thinking about that as a different thing.
So the topic
is QP. The topic is QP. So thank you for bringing us back. I appreciate that.
One final diversion.
Yeah.
And I think I want to be clear. What Dave said was, if you do combine them, that's gonna put some people out of business, too.
No. He's saying if what I said were true, it would put people out of business. But I wasn't intending to say you can't do one or the other. I was saying it's almost like a dual qualification. People who are doing this inspection when you're selling the home are qualified by BTR, but you could also be qualified under us and do the same thing.
That makes sense to me. I guess I missed the point.
And honestly, I don't know the BTR rules on how that dual exposure thing would work.
So we have two people. Go ahead, Ken. I'm sorry. I'm going to go to you guys first.
Ken Frederick. When you look at the inspection per buyer, just real quick, 10% of the business I do are from buyers who buy my services after the inspection, whether it be a treatment or for pest control or whatever.
Right.
I cannot qualify for a license under BTR to continue to do those inspections if I understand the BTR requirements, unless they create another licensing requirement. And I know of a guy in Tucson who 65% of his business is done through inspections, and I asked him about this, and he had to close the door.
Is that because there's some educational thing, or
I don't know all the requirements he does, some guy I spoke to, and I told him to send you a letter about it. Okay, he's concerned.
I don't understand why you'd have to close the doors. Because he's just doing.
He does inspections plus the treatment. Don't get me wrong, he does it both.
Yeah. But if they're joint qualified, it wouldn't close it down. If they just said they were on a BTR, it might close it down.
For the inspection part of it, you have to get another license.
So, okay, I'm gonna go. Two more people here, and then we have to decide what we're gonna do. So, I'll allow the lady to speak one more time, and then Kevin.
I would just follow up on what you said with, and I understand the point that the consumer wants to know if there are termites, what do I do about them, and that's a valid point. But at the same time, in the interest of consumer protection, you should realize that from a home inspection standpoint, they're required to report on any adverse conditions to the structure, yet from my understanding, they're prevented by OPM regulation from reporting on termites in a home inspection report, not using the specific form. And from what the home inspection organizations put out, they're not allowed to say the word termite unless they're licensed under this agency. I, as a person buying a home, would be angry if my home inspector saw termites and wasn't allowed to tell me about it because he's not licensed by the OPM. And so from a home inspector standpoint, do you keep your mouth shut? Do you have, because you're not licensed, maybe there should be some sort of reciprocity agreement between the BTR to eliminate the need for home inspectors to be licensed as termite applicators and inspectors. And also, if it's unclear from the OPM, we've gotten a dozen different answers every time we've asked, is the QP license required both as an applicator and an inspector? And from the bulk of the answers we've gotten, you're requiring...
So, looking forward, we need to make sure we're clear. I don't want to go on what's happened in the past. I just want to keep moving forward. Just make sure it's clear. So
Absolutely.
Okay. Go ahead.
Morning, Kevin Etheridge, contracting termite and pest control. I am in favor of combining the B2 and the DA. I am licensed through the Board of Technical Registration. I'm currently inactive as a home inspector, and I can tell you when I took that test, I recollect nothing about wood destroying organisms and insects, except that if you saw something that was suspicious or looked like activity, you could note it on the report. Termite-like substance or activity noted. I am not in favor. What we're talking about is people grabbing for business. This is for economic prosperity. Home inspectors want to do termite inspections on houses because a lot of them, it's a gimme to get to the home inspection. Pest control operators, of course, want to keep the termite inspections for pest control operators so they can do the post-treatment work. I think you have a basic cost of entry into an industry. And if home inspectors want to do termite inspections, that's fine. Then they need to be licensed by the OPM. Just like if a termite inspector wants to do a home inspection, they should be licensed by the Board of Technical Registration.
Thank you. Now you guys have been, I can't remember what you guys, it's a long time we're trying to say something I didn't.
The only thing I wanted to say is, and I know we talked about the QP versus the applicator, and the thing is they need to be parallel. You can't have a QP category that doesn't equate to an applicator category. The applicator will never get to the QP section of it. So that's the reason why there is that parallel together.
What we're doing is discussing how the QPs are going to be aligned or allocated or qualified for, and then I would presume that the applicator regs would have to be synced or changed to match up with that.
Correct. Additionally, at least with the requirement for the inspection, and I think that kind of is on track. If you're doing an inspection for the purpose of doing a treatment, the inspection's already required. It can be done by someone with a license. To be able to do an inspection just to note that there's an absence or presence, I think it would suffice to have something. We could have something, but I also don't think it'd be unreasonable to say that somebody in the BTR can say, okay, yep, that's what that looks like. You may want to contact a pest control professional in order to validate what I'm telling you. And that way, no one's getting in trouble and no one's taking anyone else's business. Okay. Both benefits.
All right. Let's kill it, huh? Let's we had a good discussion. What's that?
He's got one more, and then getting back to where you said we have to move on. Have we come to a consensus that we're going to keep the qualifying party, or we're going to move this over to the sponsor? We haven't even addressed it.
And in a general sense, I'm sorry to stop the wagon, but I have a couple of other kind of general points along that as well. So I don't want to take.
No, that was my. I'm just. Yeah. Before we start monkeying around,
I think that's a real
qualification and everything else.
That's starting to line up the issues that we're going to align today. Okay, my questions were, how does this apply to government entities, or does it?
Currently, they are not required to have that. And that's one of the things we need to fix to ensure that there is a responsibility within the governmental bodies to ensure the records are kept, people are qualified, and everything like that.
That be done.
What's that?
That be done under our auspices.
We can do it, yeah.
So we would just need some sort of political subdivision entity that does something similar to an actual business license.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's key. I think that you align what the business model should look like, and then through probably, I don't know if you have to go through law or rule, but you would just do some kind of other formulation for political subdivisions.
That question has been raised during this discussion. I think it's a fair question. You and I talked about it, and I think it's there's no reason that you should be able to do something in a county building that doesn't pass muster just like in a private building across the street.
And I think the one exception there was what drove this in the past was required a business license and a QP, and a business license made absolutely no sense because there were for government, and that's why I think we can.
Well, we're privately insured, too.
Yes, exactly.
Not like this.
Well, I mean, that can be dealt with by having a category that speaks specifically to the government, but the people are still meeting these criteria.
Exactly.
If we want to call it QP, we could just have section B that deals with vertical subdivisions, and this would be the responsibility of that person. Something different would be said.
Second point, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'd like to see us, and I don't know if it's all of B3 and B5 or just parts of it, but actually take them out of OPM and put them in ag. And maybe it's specifically it's golf courses that have been talked about a lot.
My only comment with that is you have a lot of municipality parks out there, and you have a lot of school districts that have certain problems that do have that B5 issue where you've got gopher problems, you've got ant issues, you've got other issues out there.
And that's why I phrased it that way. I think it'd be good for us to discuss. You raised the right-of-way issue earlier, so we want somebody to be able to go out and treat a right-of-way that then our fields are right on the other side of it, and there's drift, and there's no. So I just think it makes no sense to me to have golf courses have to have a QB, and I think there's got to be other areas now, a public park. Yeah, I can see that. I guess that's what I'm looking for. Before we put a nail in this, we need to address that issue too. I think there's segments that can be pulled out, put into ag, use the ag criteria, and done.
Park is public.
So to go to John,
To Bill's first point, my concern, I'm going to get more confused, but to the point of moving things over to the ag side, the one concern that I have is that I think a lot of times these are delineated by where the land is and what's adjacent to it. Although on the farm side of things, on the ag side of things, we deal with issues all the time where we're right up against the subdivision. We have a subdivision that cuts out in. But normally we can fairly well define that line, and we have to coexist. So Jack, that's where you guys respond more issues and calls than anything is so-and-so in a subdivision next to some ag field. And that's unfortunate, but that's reality. But I think when we get to some of the turf and ornamental stuff, I think if we boil some of this stuff down, there's no reason it can't exist under OPM. Simplify some of this stuff. I would have a hard time, because on the ag side we have to delineate where our properties are, their section, township, and range, and you start carving up properties. But on the ag side, or on the golf course or on a park or something like that, the issue that I see is that oftentimes they curve around. It's harder to delineate, and I would think that would be more part and parcel to dealing with homes and interfacing with the community that way. And so I would rather have somebody, I guess, in my mind, dealing that those are more, I guess, together than with ag on a lot of notes. I mean, most golf courses, unless they're in Union, have houses stacked all around, or unless they're way off the stick. So
our fields butt up to houses almost all the way across the valley, and I agree with you that there needs to be, and how this is broken up, there needs to be a relatively easy defining point, whether it's a golf course, but I mean, again, we have fields that go right up to hospitals, schools. There's regulations in ag that guide us in how we treat it, and it influences absolutely how we plan. But it's still, public safety is considered and protected under the ag rules in that setting. And I would think that and again, golf courses is the example that jumps to my mind, but for the park, maybe not.
The other point, I'm sorry, the other point was, I wanted to ask Jack, because on the ag side of things, on our licenses, when we do the rules, there's a checkoff for if you work for a government agency. What does that, I mean, obviously it's never applied to me, but is there an exemption from paying? Yes. The fees?
That's it.
And if that's the exemption, then I wouldn't see how any political subdivision, if we move that over to OPM, and you said the same things, well, on a golf course, or on a municipal golf course, or with a school district, or with a city or whatever, you still should have to have a a person that does some of the functions of what we're delineating here as a QP or whatever, and then have people working under them, even if they still should have to obtain the licenses, even if they're not paying the fees because they're a government entity. I think as an issue as far as how we're working with the public and how we're interfacing, if we want to provide I think we should provide an avenue for folks working in government to be able to have that QP position and make that clear. So if we're continuing on with QP.
Vince is about ready to pop.
Sorry.
No, this is all good. I'm going to be a little presumptuous and just state that the options that are here in the sheet can actually be addressed despite the issues, because the whole thing with golf courses isn't mentioned on this document. So we could actually even
pull it out.
Yeah, exactly. So because see, this document isn't talking about the duties of the QP. It's not talking about what the QP has to do. The issue last month was getting a QP is a barrier. Now the barrier is removed, so the issue is, can we accept this the way that it is, so that then we can go forward, and then we can discuss, okay, where are we going to put the golf courses?
And Dave,
you know what, I just had a question, you might be able to answer. How do you work the Arizona Farm in Maricopa?
Matt? Those guys are...
Some of the University Farm?
Yeah, they're certified and licensed just like it's a farm.
And so, I mean, it's run like a private farm? It's run like a private entity? It's a farm.
There is a caveat to that. They're conducting valid research. They don't need the license for it.
They have to let, and some things they have to let check.
Yes, depending on the farm. But I mean, they have licensed people.
Since we're on this thing with golf course, we do have a representative of the Golf Course Superintendents Association, which would be nice to hear from him about their opinion.
Okay.
About here right now.
Get up and speak loudly.
My name is Dennis Delaney. I represent the Cactus and Vine Superintendents Association. I did have a couple of points that I real briefly wanted to make regarding golf courses specifically. As Dave Burns pointed out a little bit earlier in the meeting, golf courses represent an entirely different set of circumstances as far as the qualifying party goes, exactly, and I agree with that. What we've got similarities are, as far as pesticides used on golf courses, are almost identical to those used in agriculture. Application equipment is identical, if not the exact same type of equipment used in agriculture on golf courses. Golf courses apply to large acres, not small backpack interior urban settings, but golf course acres. Pesticide storage areas are secured in one location, not in a truck that drives around town. They're locked up every night on a golf course. The pesticide drift can and does apply to golf courses as well as agriculture. What I'm implying is that golf courses really need to be more in line with agriculture. And in terms of the qualifying party, all of the training and everything that's offered to Office of Pest Management right now could be done just as well or probably better for golf courses under ags. That's what I wanted to talk about for golf courses. Great. Thank you.
Do you guys use a PCA if you have a issue, or you have somebody that you trust that he's your guy, your employee?
Each golf course has a qualifying party as well as certified applicators.
So you diagnose all your own problems, and you don't really go outside.
No.
Okay.
The other thing that, so you know, if we do come under any fall under worker protection standards, I don't know if you guys have those now.
That's the golf courses have fallen under us in situations where they have a nursery where they're growing their own trees and shrubs and things that's for replacement on it, but the golf course itself does not fall under the worker protection standards.
Right. Will it though?
We would have to change the rules.
Good point. Which we have to do.
Dennis, I have one more question for you. Most of your superintendents come out of a college certified certification program, correct?
Yes.
They do have college education.
Yes, the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America certifies superintendents in the standards for their education.
So it's like professional licensing. I mean, they become like a trainee for after they come out of college, and then they go for 2 years, or they have to take an exam, and they go for like 2 years, and then they take a professional exam. Okay. Right. Okay. So to get back to what you were kind of getting at, and I appreciate what Vince said. You know, are we? I just what we call it. I don't care. Honestly, I don't care what we call it. But I guess we have to look at the concept, whether it's called a qualifying party or a responsible party. You know, we have to look at what I'm gathering is it appears that the task force is agreeing that the qualifying party is something we should continue on with. There's a place we may want to draw a line as to where that is or what came through that qualifying party.
Historically, it's a name that we're all familiar with.
Yeah. So,
Jeff, I had one caveat to that. I'm good with that. The only thing is the way the law reads presently, it sets up the QP in this elevated level of responsibility for everybody working under it, that sets up a mechanism that allows that person not necessarily to be in a position where they could accomplish that. I mean, I'm sure most of these guys out here that are running a good business, they're in contact with people that are doing applications all the time, and they're doing these sorts of things. But the issue of they have to be at the place of business, you know, some of the qualifications for the QP, whether they're practical and that's what's happening or not, but that's one thing that I guess we're blessed with in ag is that when you read the qualifications, most of them are really directly applicable and whatever. When you look at that QP, they have to be available. I don't know what that means. If they're actually the person that's ensuring that the person's properly trained, they're making sure the protocols are being followed, they're making sure that pesticides are being stored. How the heck are they doing that if they just show up at their office once a month? And I'm not saying that's how business is happening, but what I am saying is that the way that QP is laid out to be effectively doing this business in law doesn't really transmit to, I guess, to where I feel comfortable as a member of this task force saying that the public is being looked out for and the customers are being looked out for by how those rules are laid out for how the QP works. So just wanted to throw that out.
Well, I wanted to take a stab at maybe addressing what you just said there, because I think you may cure a large percentage of that by doing this, because a lot of the companies have a QP that's not involved because they can't meet these requirements, so they've got to hire somebody to do that.
I'm saying this is the first part of fixing the problem, and the second is that when we write the rules for what the QP actually does, that no, they're a person that's on site, they're working directly with those people on a regular basis. It's not this removed from the and that's not okay. Yeah, no matter what you call it.
And I would agree with you, and I think this is the start of that fix, because it stops the necessity for somebody who wants to be in this business to go rent Vince for 2 years until he gets his experience and can go take the test. And Vince's really his whole job was nothing more than to be the front until that person got that qualification.
Just real quick, and you're right, this whole thing is very confusing. If you look at the QP, we have 2 different types of supervision. We have a director and immediate. And that's confusing as hell for most people. I'd like to just start from a clean slate and make it simple.
Yeah, I'm sorry, say that one more time so I understand.
Maybe Vince, explain the difference between immediate and direct.
Yeah, there are two definitions of supervision in our statutes. There is direct supervision, which basically means that you have to be available for your applicants, whether it's by way of phone call, they can drive to your place, hey, I need some help. But then there's immediate. Immediate is you have to be within eyesight or within earshot, and that applies to restricted use pesticides when the applicators are not licensed.
And there are
the applicators are not licensed.
Correct. Yeah. Because during the training process, you don't want that applicator to have to call somebody. You want the licensed supervisor present on site.
And that's right. So it's now okay. So go ahead. there are things we have to address, and I think one of the big hurdles was a QP. I think we're in agreement that we're keeping a QP. There's some areas, we looked at some levels here. And we've also looked at the potential of golf courses somehow, because the business model doesn't really fit here, trying to fit that. Is it under ag, or is there some simplified process we put here?
Is there other settings other than golf courses?
Yeah. Well, and
they don't come to me right now, but maybe they are.
Well, we had a discussion. I thought right away was one of those, but these guys actually told me there are companies out there that they go out and they spray right away. I mean, I don't think it was just the governmental entities themselves, but
we do a lot of rides over there.
Yeah. So I would think we should.
Make a motion and we take all.
I suggest well, just a suggestion, Ms. Russo. I think we've had a great discussion today. I'm not saying it should end, but I do think there's enough kind of loose ends that I would recommend that you take this back, rewrite it. I'm not trying to prolong the process, but I think we're 95% there, but I think in fairness, we ought to have it laid out in front of us, and then I would think that there's a motion is appropriate. But that's just my suggestion.
I actually, as the chair, I would prefer not to get a motion on that quite yet either. I'd rather.
I think there's enough loose ends. I just need to see you guys go back, kind of use your expertise, talk about golf courses.
On the golf course point, that's something Jack's going to have to look at how, because that work protection standard is huge for them. And yeah, golf courses either need their own section or they need to fit well into something, not like they did.
And these guys made and I'll get to you, Robert, these guys made a point when we were talking about this too, that I had thought about, I'm going, well, we should move these guys out, and they said, well, looking at you guys as a regulated community, we don't want to make it problematic for you. So now all of a sudden we say, okay, you're under the Department of Agriculture. Well, we're also licensed by Office of Pest Management, and this is ultimately going to get us to B1, but there's differing requirements, and does that make it problematic for people? So if we're getting to B1, it may be that it fits under OPM, but there are lessening requirements on certain categories. So
that's why I think you guys need time to.
So Robert, you want to
just kind of keeping in sync with what we have on the agenda, and obviously what we're looking at here. Is there anything, particularly the one with the well, I guess first thing, one, I think perhaps, I don't know if it's premature to say that we do want to, that a motion be made to keep the qualifying party. And at least deal with that, because obviously if you're not going to keep it, then there's no reason for us to even look at this anymore. So I think an idea of saying, okay, yeah, we're going to keep the qualifying party, we're going to make whatever necessary changes. I think in addition to that, it would be, you then take a look at the requirements that we have, or at least what we have here, and if there's, look at them and say, okay, we want to repair this, rather than taking the whole document back.
Yeah, I was going to get there, Robert. Just from the first part, I think we're okay, but I also want to look at the broadening part of this as well, because we have several options here. And the way I take it, and I don't think we need a motion yet either, and I think we have the first part. This is what we've laid out, we like it. We're going to go through, we're going to draft up that relates to this. We have broadening, which we haven't had any discussion on yet. And again, if you're okay with it, we liked option one, so we'll move forward with option one as our choice, and we can tweak this, or you can tweak it if you don't like it when you see the language written down in a form.
I personally like the option of doing this, but I'm also not in the business, so I would ask Ken and Dave, this is going to affect them.
And it wasn't supposed to be option one, option two, or option three. This was to give you you could look at the options, but we picked one of the options, and the one that we liked was one. So go ahead.
I have two things. I do like option one as well, but I would question whether B8 is, if we're not going to combine the licenses, I don't think B8 qualifies you to do anything because you're not going to have no experience behind the working end of the equipment.
And we actually, you're right. We will, and I guess that's a good thing to bring up here. We'll show this as we would like to see it because in my mind, I wanted to combine the B2 and B8.
The second thing is I need some clarification from a comment that was made earlier on the categories B3, B5, B8. We have on this document certified for 6 months. Did the group agree with that, or did it want to be consistent with the top part on 24 months? I don't think I ever heard what the group's final feeling was on that.
I threw out the idea that I felt like it was A, confusing, B, it didn't make sense to have two different standards.
So maybe consistent with the top half?
I agree with that. And I felt the opposite. I felt like it's fine as long as those categories are, defined a little more clearly. And where I'm going is if you're going to go out and spray right away, I would think that having 6 months training would be adequate. But it's kind of, it's a little bit splitting hairs, and I can.
But being that this is not for an applicator license, that this is for the qualified party, I think that to have that qualified party license, it didn't make sense that if you're going to be the pinnacle of responsibility basically in that organization, I thought 6 months was too short.
I agree. It should be the same.
Well, I agree.
One thing I wanted to ask as a point of clarity on these options as we look down into broadening. In the top, it mentions passive core and a category-specific exam. So just as a point of clarity, I assume when we're talking about broadening, if a person's passed the core, much like on the ag side with a PCA license, if you pass the core, you're not talking about retesting the core, you're talking about only taking that specific category section. Correct. I just want to make sure that we weren't talking about variable cores, so we have two cores.
The one thing I guess to throw out here in the mix of this, the B3 has been B3, which was the weed, is this backpack sprayer exemption. Part of this whole deal was to try to, the legislature, it wasn't you folks, it was the folks that are out there doing the lawn care maintenance. They go out there with the spritzing. And we need, and what we need to do here is we need to allow those people, if they're doing that, the opportunity to come into this without making it so they have to be a brain surgeon to get there. So in my mind, we have to somehow deal with that. And by combining this in the turf ornamental, I don't know what that gets us there.
You sent them? You put them in eggs, or?
I think that years past, structurals always had some form of gardener exemption. And in the simple terms, it was if the spritzing of weeds with a small amount of pesticide was incidental to what you were there for, which is mowing the grass, trimming the bushes, that I think you had to be certified. I think you had to have a certification, but you didn't have to have a full business license. I think that's kind of historically how that gardener exemption works. It's been a while since we've had it. But
the state of Tennessee has a gardener exemption, and New Mexico. This is other state. There's 2 states in
So do we feel that we can address this by clearing up language or something to address this?
Oh, we can go through?
Yes.
Oh, definitely.
Okay. So if you guys are okay with that, we'll take a shot at that as well to include some language to deal with those situations.
Just for clarification, can you explain to them what landscape exemption is so they understand that? It's an 8-gallon spritz.
We have a definition statute called the weed control exemption. And essentially it was brought to our attention because a senator felt that these individuals do not necessarily have to be licensed through our agency, that they're just spritzing weeds. So then this exemption was created that basically stated as long as you're applying from equipment that holds 8 gallons or less, and the work that you're doing is in conjunction with gardening, landscape maintenance, you don't need a license. However, what the issue is with that is, well, what does that mean, equipment that holds 8 gallons or less? How many individuals can actually be out there at a time? Because there were actual companies who will send their whole crew out there with equipment that holds less than 8 gallons, and they're doing the same thing that a big license we can go out and do.
Okay.
And you're gonna come back with something
from government. Yeah. We'll deal with that as well. So,
just a question, folks. No, so the part that says certified for 6 months, is that being changed to 24 months now? If I may just throw one thing out there, when we encounter these guys out in the field that are doing weed control work or that need a license, they may have been spraying for 2, 3, 4 years. Well, now we're telling them, oh, guess what? Now you need an additional 2 years as a certified applicator, whereas up at the top, these other folks, they already have a license.
But you're going to write something for gardening that deals with that.
Okay.
Exactly.
Whatever.
Okay.
One more comment, if I may, on the options part of it. Maybe you can get to later, I apologize. Are we going to recommend that we eliminate the B7 and the B6 category?
Well, we'll put it together. We're going to put these things in a, I think that's kind of what Dave was asking about, because I said we have this B8 category out there, so we'll put that. Yes.
Jack, just to add one thing to what Ben said is personally, let me make sure I say this right. Illegal experience is experience. So if you're a weed control, if you're a landscaper and you've been doing weeds and it might not have been legal, I personally like to see a mechanism in which you can look at that guy and say, hey, you've been doing weeds for 25 years. Okay.
Amnesty doesn't fly. we may be treading another way.
And again, I want to word it right because that may not be the way to word it, but you've got companies that, well, you guys are a good example. If you wanted to get in the landscape business, I don't think you should be exempt from that. And I don't think you should have to have a certification for 24 months if you've been licensed ag guy doing weed work around your farm for 30 years.
It specifically says certified in a similar area to qualify people from other states or other businesses that have an applicable. So both for QP and for applicator endorsements.
So you can say 24 months of experience. I'm just looking at now, I'm reading number 2. You're right. It's just, you could have 24 months of experience.
Yeah, we'll have to reword this to get it, we're talking, the easy thing for us is certification. We know that, but we have to address this other issue somehow. So, okay, anybody else here? I'm going to go to Rob.
Kelly, perhaps a spritzer would maybe just need to pass the core, which covers general knowledge, safe handling, worker safety, that type of, just basic so that they know how to wear gloves.
Okay. All right, Henry?
Henry Scheicher, International Accommodations. I'm kind of curious. I'm not seeing the logic behind. You've got this 2-year requirement. Someone needs to have this license for 2 years, and they don't have to do anything with it. They just have to be in possession of it for 2 years before they're allowed to take this test, which will determine whether or not they're qualified. Why do I have to wait 2 years to take the test? Why can't I just take the test? If the test is a good test, the test will determine whether or not I have the knowledge, no matter how I've gotten it, whether it was legally, illegally, from spraying my grandmother's yard or doing work as a high school student. What difference does it make where the qualification came from? Why should I be required to wait 2 years to take the test, to pass the test, to get my license?
He brings up an interesting point. I guess my opinion on that would be, I would like to see it where you have 2 years experience as an employer. You're actually doing the work. You're just not sitting around in your lazy boy for 24 months as a licensed applicator and then being qualified for QP.
Well, if you
demonstrate you got that experience somehow, someplace.
But if your test is valid, then I can demonstrate that I have the skills by taking that test.
But if you rewrite the QP exam, I don't see where you would really pass that exam unless you actually have real field experience in that area.
Then the test should be sufficient, and there should be no time requirement.
Well, this is one of the things that we're kind of going around.
Yeah, we're starting to chase our tail.
Yeah.
I like the 2 years experience. I've heard people talk about it. I think they've raised some good points. I think when you start to try to define that experience, then we're really opening a can of worms. So.
It's hard. And that was part of the problem, that we talked about previously. It's just, ideally, most people will follow the pattern that we intend, and there's going to be others who don't. So we will draft language dealing with this. So thank you. I appreciate that. Next. Yeah. Let's. Do we have time to get into the tarps? And I guess I'll just state that.
Let's go.
Does anybody need a bathroom break? No, we'll continue on. If you need a bathroom break, you're just going to have to get up and go. Not here, in the bathroom. For the tarp, as Courtney said, there's been a mixed bag on this. Definitely people don't like to pay the $8 per tarp. That is clear as can be. And what we did here is we listed currently what is reported on the tarps, what are having to be reported on the right-hand side, looked at what it could be reduced to, lessening a little bit of the burden, but still allowing us, because it is a regulatory tool for us as well. We find some things out through this tarp process where people aren't doing things properly, so it serves some benefit for us. It has nothing to do with the fee. We understand, we've heard a lot of people don't want to pay $8 per tarp, so we need to address that. Now, this is just the process. Does this group feel that we want to keep the tarp or not? The thing that came out of Tucson, and I guess we talked about it a little bit in Phoenix when we had the meeting, was, this industry doesn't necessarily need to pay for it, but the realtors are ones who tend to use that on a more regular basis. And so maybe could there be a fee associated with using it? Could be there, somehow to help to pay, because everybody wants to reduce fees, but we also have to remember that this is a self-supported, regulated industry. So there has to be, the funding has to come in to continue to be regulated. So, and I don't think there's anybody that wants regulations to go out the window, because again, the good guys are here, and the ones that aren't here maybe are not so good. So, I think this serves a purpose. I know people have been people are adamantly opposed to it. And there are people, even Ken at the meeting it was at the town hall meeting in Tempe, wasn't it? Tempe, where you said that you are not a supporter of this, but you actually used it recently, and it was
Well, yeah, I used it to help me make a sale, but
maybe in the long term.
I have two concerns with the tarp. One is it needs to include information. And two, if we do keep it and we change it, one, I think WDIR should be part of the process because we're not making a chemical application. However, that impacts your funding quite a bit, because I would imagine most of the tarps come in through WDIR right now. But the second thing is, my biggest fear is that one day in the future, some legislature is going to get a bug up their behind and want us to report every chemical application. And that's my biggest fear.
Because we do
every termite, every pest control, everything. Because there are states that have tried it and find out that it's not worth it. They don't have the resources to do it. But we have a computer system here right now that works with the tarping. And what would it take to increase it? I don't know. I don't know any of that. But that's my biggest fear. When you let bureaucrats get in a little bit, they take it a mile. And that's my biggest fear. That's why I would love to see it go away, because it doesn't keep completely.
So Kim, is your complaint then form or the fees or both?
The fee's one thing. I pass it on to the consumer. I don't like the late fee. However, I don't do the inspection. I don't know how anybody out here does it at WDIR. It doesn't get paid at the time of service. A lot of people used to bill it through escrow, but it's only in default now. And in the end, I'm not getting paid. So I get paid at the time of service. So the late fee doesn't affect me. And I think the late fee should stay where it is, because it has to hurt. Frankly, it has to hurt. If you make us pay. But I'm not a proponent of the TARP. I just think it's good. I use it to my benefit, and I use it as best as I can. But I also understand that there's going to be some in the legislature that sees this as a consumer protection component, and they may not accept us getting rid of it, even though it isn't.
So you advocate changing the form like these guys have suggested, or
simplify it, but hold their feet to the fire where they are complete and as such accurate.
What we do now is fine. But if I do a treatment to a house that's under warranty, I don't have to park that chemical application because it's under warranty. That's what I mean by incomplete information. So, however, if you're buying a property and you check, and I know we all do it, okay, Burns Pest Elimination did a treatment on that house 3 years ago.
And you know that because you can look at the chart.
So I tell the buyer every time, call Burns. See, if it's not under warranty, or if it is under warranty, you call Burns and get all the information, treatment history on the house, because he's required by law to keep it for 5 years.
But that's assuming this company just got the business. That's the problem.
But you know that because there is a registration.
Right.
If there's no registration, you wouldn't know it.
I wouldn't know that.
Neither would the new homeowner.
So there is some benefit. Don't get me wrong. Okay. I just fear the bureaucrats wanting more.
So, Jack, maybe you could,
that's a valid fear, yeah.
in your proposed TARP information, Rich, could you explain what you actually mean by post-construction treatment type of treatment? We're talking about warranty, out of warranty?
Yeah. Post-construction treatment here on the car deals with the initial treatment. Let me start with the pre-treatment. It's probably easier. If a company pre-treats a home, they apply the termiticide to the soil prior to the slab being poured. They have to submit a TARP for that because that is the initial action. During the course of that home being in existence, the home may have occurrence of termites. They'll go out and they'll treat that. Well, now that's called a post-construction treatment because the house is already constructed. However, they don't have to TARP that one because the company already turned in an initial treatment during the pre-treatment. See, so during that 5 years, they don't have to turn in new TARPs for any subsequent occurrences for which they perform treatment. Let's say, for example, though, the house is 50 years old, and we call Burns. Burns comes out, Burns is going to do a post-construction treatment because the house is already constructed. Burns is going to have to turn in a TARP for that because it is the initial treatment. See, so the post-construction treatment doesn't refer to any subsequent treatments after the pre-treatment. It refers to the initial treatment that the company performs.
They're not connected. I mean, you have a pre-construction treatment, then if you feel like if it turns out you have a subsequent infestation, that's the initial treatment for that infestation.
No, actually, if Burns did the pre-treatment, then the post-treatment, which is a corrective treatment, doesn't have to be submitted to us.
He's saying because it's still under warranty.
Yes.
Oh, but yeah, okay.
Because it's under warranty. If it's not under warranty, then it's yes. Okay. David's been sitting here for wanting to say something for ages.
I jumped 2 things. One, how many paper TARPs are filed? Do you know?
Less than 1% now.
Oh, cool. Okay, that's good. All right. My position on TARPs, from a sheer industry point of view, I'm conservative. I don't think they're accurate. I think they're cumbersome, they're burdensome, they're expensive. They don't serve a purpose except generating revenue. I believe consumers see value. I believe consumers do see value.
They see a value.
And I believe that this agency is a consumer agency, so they can't look at the industries, they can't look at the industry as a sole need. They have to respond to what the consumer is. Because Ken's right. Some senator's going to have their daughter buy a house, and it'll be wrong, and he'll be standing over here talking. So, my suggestion is that we simplify this process, because from an industry standpoint, we know the information is not accurate. It is very confusing, as you just saw. It's confusing to us. I don't understand why we can't simply go online and file property address,
Treatment.
some action was done by Burns Pest Elimination. If you need to know about it, call them. Here's their number. Then in rule or statute, whichever one they determine best, you put down the responsibility for a company to react on that in a certain period of time. If a consumer says, hey, I saw you on on the OPM site that you did something on my property at 123 Elm, what did you do? And the guy says, I'll get back to you. There should be something in rule or law that says you'll respond to that person in a proper amount of time and give them those records. And if you don't, then you get to come before us and explain why you feel it's not necessary. And now you have a very simple process that takes literally seconds to do on a computer. I think that an agency can then look at the true value the true cost associated with running that system. And then you can determine what that fee is. And you might find that the licensee and termites could be changed to fix that, and you may never have to charge an actual fee for filing the form.
I guess the question I ask is, are you guys willing to take calls from all these folks?
I am.
Is that a business? Business? All right. John, did you?
Yeah, I just was going to say that it would seem, if I was over at the legislature serving there, and this was brought before me and said, albeit the prices may be too high, and albeit the process may be confusing, but it works, and it does have value for the consumer, why would we go backwards to just be as simple as, oh, here's the company's name, now you got to go haggle them for the info or whatever. Why wouldn't you continue on with the system, but make it simple, concise, and have the information be correct?
I think I have that. I don't know that you could make the information correct on the system. I think there's too in-depth of information that's needed. I think that by saying that a wood report was done and there was evidence of infestation, that really doesn't tell the consumer anything. Did you find termites in my garage? Did you find them in the shed? Did you find wood? It just says you found evidence. I think the consumer is better served if you say, hey, there was a termite action done. You call the company, they will give you everything on it. Everything that was done, you'll get the actual report. You'll get the actual treatment record, the graph showing that those chemicals, where those chemicals were applied, what was applied, when was it applied, how many retreats were performed. You would get that record. Now that's valuable.
That serves the public much more than that.
But on the ag side, in comparison, I would say that we have a system that works, that's reporting, it's factual, it's detailed enough, and it tells the tale of what happened that day as far as what the pest condition was. And so, from that standpoint, I don't know. I mean, and that serves the consumer protection from the standpoint of adjacent land use and whatever, and it's the record, and we're required to keep it. And I guess, and I don't have a problem with showing people either the Department of Ag or somebody involved as an adjacent public record. I mean, all they have to do is request it. I mean, to me, the system you just lined out fits more into we want the repeat customer. And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean, it really sets that up more than just providing the information.
He wants to talk about something, but if you want to talk about, kind of going to change a little bit?
No, I want to address a little bit what Dave was talking about, the brevity of the report. It's because you guys use a lot of the same compounds we do in agriculture. I want to know what you're using from a database standpoint for a variety. I mean, there's a myriad of reasons why we need to know that, all of the regulation. And if you can report to the department that you've used whatever it is, fluoridate, I want to know. I would like to be knocking on my door. I'd like to know where you can get them. But I'd like to know that in agriculture, what you guys are using, how much you're using, that kind of stuff, because that's valuable information for us, because we have so many single
So right now, when I do a post-construction termite treatment on a home, I have to say what product they use and how much. And then in my office, I have to keep all the records of how the house was treated, where the materials were applied, and all that kind of stuff.
I could conceive of many instances, both things to do with groundwater, where we would have to know.
Yeah, and to Lynn's point, and we're not in opposition with you guys on that. We're all in the same boat on that. As far as keeping compounds that we use registered and available for use, AD2 will shut us down. They have monitoring wells all over the place. And if we don't have the data to back up why there was an exceedance of some particular material, it's been invaluable on the ag side to have that information being passed. And anybody who's applying pesticides, that should be universal.
Here's the difference in my opinion. David, how many homes a month do you guys treat? 35,000. You want 35,000 records every month?
Doesn't matter.
We report on 35,000. No, I'm talking about the way you guys are doing, you're talking about all pesticide applications. My concern is Maricopa County Vector Control, we make over 100,000 pesticide applications a year. You really want that much information?
How many 1080s do you get back now? A year?
That's it. That's the difference. You know, where do you draw the line? What information you need?
I would answer the same way these guys have, that we need to know that, and that's all. We've gone to the next topic now, so we better go back to that. But there's a lot of reasons why he needs to know the agency, the regulating groups need to know.
But I'm in agreement with you, but I think in the structural, I could see potentially reporting all restricted use products, or maybe applications. But applications may be in very sensitive areas, like at hospitals, for instance, or food handling establishments, or something like that. But the day-to-day operations of treating a house or treating a telephone utility, do we really need to make that
not a restricted use compound? Then that's up for discussion.
And on the ag side, there's one other clarity on the ag side that we have to report everything that's on the groundwater protection list, or any restricted use that's applied to customer or commercial. So that's, and maybe it needs to come along those lines or something.
So I have a question. So then you have to report anything on the groundwater protection and restricted use. What about non-restricted?
Non-restricted use,
You have to report groundwater.
If it's commercially applied. If it's commercially applied, yes.
Okay. And I think two things from the structural standpoint. Number one, there's far more pesticides applied in the general pest control side of it than there is in the termite side. Parks only address termite side of things. Okay. So quantity-wise, there's a lot more diversity over on the general pest control side. So I don't think you're getting that information anyways. Not from the TARP system.
You may have one point, and that's that one of the compounds, and I don't know today, but a couple of years ago, one of the compounds that you guys were using to do, from my understanding, or what I understand of it, to do a lot of the treatments, which was metacloprate, is on the groundwater protection list. And any application I do is not restricted use product. But I have to report every application, and it matters because that one it does move.
And I see two different things here. I really do value that you need to know that, and I believe if we're going to be fair partners, we probably have to take some form of action to be able to give the agency that data for the protection of chemicals in the future. I don't disagree there, but I don't think this is what does that. I think that maybe in the future, we might need to talk about reporting specific pesticides in restricted use, which we already keep. We do have those records already. We probably don't keep groundwater protection products. I'm not sure that our industry even really has a
We're going to go to Vince right after you this time, so everybody's go ahead.
This is a whole different animal, but currently there's a whole new permit program out there called National Pesticide Discharge System. We're knee deep into it. we apply a pesticide to an area or some sort of protected water situation, we have to put together an entire notice of intent plus a pest management plan on the whole backyard. We work directly with EQ on it, but there's limitations on what pesticides, what areas you treat, as well as the total amount of acreage that you apply. Most of the pest control companies in here don't come under that because they don't apply under 600 acres or wet. We do, so we have to conform to that process. So because they, in my opinion, they've gone around the fifth foot and brought it under the Clean Water Act and screwed the whole process.
That's a different story. Yeah. Vince, you're going to bring us back to the chart about the value that as a regulatory agency, I'm guessing. So go ahead.
Right, because comments were made about what's going to benefit the consumer, what doesn't benefit the consumer. But the proposed information, the reason why it's still voluminous in content is because we were looking at it from a compliance standpoint also. I will tell you, and I mentioned this a couple months ago, but now we have another one. And our current TAR system is how we discovered it. We have had a total of 3 realtors, 2 within the past year, who the company would turn in a WDIR and say evidence of termites. The realtor changed it to no evidence. So the consumer has a report that says no evidence, but on the database it says evidence. We investigated, found out the realtor did. We currently have a case right now where a homeowner came in here because he lives in a subdivision where the subdivision has nothing but basement homes. He says, the company's short at my home. We started to look at all the addresses, and it was the same amount for every single address. We wouldn't have known that had we not looked at, granted, we could have called the company and said, hey, give us these addresses, but then the company probably could have said, okay, the OPM is asking, why are they asking for this information? Let's go out and check it out first. But, granted, I'm not saying that the company's a bad company, but we do run into that. When the minute that we ask for records, the company starts to wonder, hey, why are they asking for these records? We need to investigate and find out why. So in these instances, the information that we have, even the information that we're proposing, still helps us to ensure compliance assistance.
And that's an important point to make in front of all of you guys, because again, when somebody screws up, you want us to beat the crap out of them. And you guys do things right, so we can come out and look at your stuff and beat the crap out of you, but these guys don't do things right, and so then we can't beat the crap out of them because they don't have anything. And unfortunately, that's what happens. And this at least is a partial tool for us to get at this stuff.
And I think at the end of the day, it's right, wrong, or indifferent. It's perceived as a consumer protection, and it's a kind of a focal point for homeowners. And so, yeah.
And one of the things that was stated just at the town hall meeting, Dave kept asking, and it came down to, and finally people, I think it came to, if I recall correctly, people said, if I had to pay $1, I'd pay $1. Yeah. It got to the point where people said for $1, big deal. So just whether that comes to that or not, I'm just throwing it out. That's what we're responsive. So,
and I do think this really becomes a monetary issue in the industry side. If it doesn't cost us a lot of money,
right?
And just the fee, but again, simplified, because again, the fee is one side. I have a person that I have to pay annually. That's her whole job. Nothing but sitting there filing tarps. Now, smaller companies, they, unfortunately, you know what? They work all day long. Then they get to go home and work the night shift doing this work. That's tough on them. I'm just telling you, it's tough on them.
I do it every Friday. I do it every Friday.
He did it Tuesday, Friday. Wouldn't be late.
I would say from a consumer protection standpoint, the idea this protects the consumers is a false premise. I know many realtors who, very few of them use this system, and buyers too, but the small percentage that do know about it and use it, a lot of times you'll have buyers that will say, oh, I don't need a termite inspection because I saw that there was one done 3 months ago and there was no termites found. the minute that inspector drives off, there may be a rainstorm, comes in, blows off a shingle and creates a leak, a conducive condition, or the owner may have a load of firewood delivered, set up against the side of the house. So in some respects, it's giving a false sense of security that this place was just inspected and it doesn't need an inspection because it just recently had one. On the warranty side of if I call an AC guy in to replace my AC, and I'm selling my house, I'm going to tell that buyer, hey, I got a warranty on the AC. Why can that not be between the buyer and the seller? Why does the government need to be here to help? And if I call a roofer in to look at my roof, how is it my neighbor's business that my roofer found a leak in my roof? From a privacy standpoint, it's nobody's business if I have my house inspected for termites and they find them. I can understand that. I won't speak to the treatment side. I don't deal with treatment so much, but maybe putting chemicals in the ground, that's a different story. But it's nobody else's business from a privacy standpoint if I have someone come out to see are there bugs in my house. And if I have a warranty, I'm certainly going to pass that information on, and I don't know why the government needs to be involved in that.
I'll just tell you my perspective. When I sold my house, I was so pissed off at next people I didn't tell them squat.
Actually, go under real estate law, the SLUD report is required to disclose termite treatments, termite inspections, wood destroying.
That's how I see it's different than your roof or your AC unit. Is that it's not alive and it doesn't live in the ground and move around and be transitory. So that's the difference.
Maybe one more time. Yeah. Let's make a decision. Let me articulate this. Target.
We're fortunate here in Arizona that most of the termites that we have really cause very little damage to the structure. Not like the Formosan termites and some of the other species of termites. Having said that, I don't understand, and I didn't quite understand, why are we picking on the companies out there in termite work, forcing them to go through this whole process of filling out documentation, signing fees, and everything else. It seems like we're just grabbing that one little section of the pest control community out there and saying, hey, you're going to be responsible for financing all this pest management. To me, why don't we go after the guys out there that are doing the road work? They're applying more toxic chemical. There's more potential for humans and pets to become exposed. I'm just being facetious here. I just don't quite understand the logical thinking behind this whole thing. I know how this got started historically, but to me it doesn't make any logical sense whatsoever. Why we just go after the termite industry? If we're going to go after the termite industry, let's just open it up and make everybody, like these gentlemen are saying, just report everything to us.
That's my idea. Good point. Okay, so what do we want to do? And I'm going to tell you, whether you guys care. I told you why the tarp is useful to us. We will survive one way or the other, whether the tarp is there or not. I think we have to keep in mind the legislature. I think that's important as we make this decision, what the legislature is going to think about this and what they're not going to think about this. So, having said that, then we all get to make a decision on it.
Jason, pleasure for my control. If you guys are going to plan on keeping the tarps, and that's the way it's going to stand, and we're talking about, as the gentleman was saying about termite or rodent jobs, stuff like that, why don't we charge a flat fee if we absolutely have to keep it for everybody per year? Let's say it's $400. That's always an idea. I mean, instead of $8, that way it's kind of fair across the board for every company.
Okay, thank you. All right. So we have to make a decision. I mean, do we? I guess the first decision is, do we want to keep the tarp or don't we want to keep the tarp? And is that the part of the way, John?
I would say it's going to be a pretty hard sell from a consumer standpoint, whether it's real or not. I agree with that. The system's in place. Parts of it function. I think parts of it don't function, or this gap between people saying there's a pre-treatment and the warranty time frame, those aren't necessarily reported. I think to add value to the system, the consolidate and get to the real meat and potatoes of what needs to be reported. But unfortunately, then you report those instances that are the gaps in the information and have that as part of the system, but lower the fee to where it's 10 cents. Whatever the industry needs to pay for that aspect of the system, and let your licensing fees support the rest of the regulated aspect. But I think that's probably where Jack maybe thinking of.
I agree wholeheartedly, and it's not fair to have the termite industry pay the lion's share of the administration of the OPM. I think we can all agree on that. So I like your point, Ken, about, let's simplify it, streamline it, make it where it's real information, and then have the fee, whatever that cost the department to run, reflect that. It won't be anywhere near $8.
I mean, to me, the most important information on the farm is who did the treatment. So if you call that company and get the information that you need.
Sure. And again, that's not my area of expertise. I'm not going to propose to get too involved in what should be on it. But you guys know.
Yeah, and that's what I guess I wanted to
Well, just to finish my comment, though, just so everybody knows, it's going to cost X to run OPM.
Sure.
And it doesn't matter to me from a Department of Ag standpoint whether it's borne by. Well, it does matter to me whether it's borne by the termite industry, because I don't think that's fair. But it needs to be borne by a fee structure going to have to be created that funds OPM in the Department of Ag.
Okay, my comment. I think we have two separate issues here. The first one is the TARP system. Does it stay or does it go? I agree. Legislation's not going to let it go. Not right now.
Not working.
Pick your fight. That one you're going to lose, I promise. Okay. We can write law, rewrite law, or rule that addresses what's in it without creating a lot of issues. And I think that's where we need to be, is yay or nay, let's not worry about the issue part of it. What we're going to have on it, I think, number one, we need to listen to the industry a lot. They're the ones that have to do it. So you got to find out what they are capable of doing. What a big company's capable of doing isn't necessarily what works for little people. And I think when it comes to the fee mechanisms, I think the gentleman there has got the right idea. You can figure out what it costs to operate the system. We know that we can make almost 100% of it electronic, so you're not going to have a lot of paper issues. So whether 100 or filed or 500, it's not going to really change significantly the cost of operating the system. So you can then say it costs X amount of dollars and associate that dollar amount to the license. So that if you have a termite license, you're going to pay X number of dollars, period, per year, and that supports the TARP program. Then if the agency finds that it's costing more, then they would have that ability to assess the dollar fee. The dollar fee addresses that minuscule amount that they missed it on, or cost of operation. We had to put another technical person on.
And that's a good point. I think the very important point is that we just need to decide, and I'm gathering that the TARP is starting needs to say we need to work on the reverse side of this as to what that is going to be then, and how we can streamline it, make it simpler, or whatever, which will have to go along with this. I think to keep the industry, in tune, because otherwise it's like lip service. We say we're going to do this, and then nobody's going to trust us. We come back and just ram it to you, so we'll have to do some of that as well. So, okay, with that, I think we're down to the discussion of the record-keeping comparisons, and I'm not sure if we're going to get started on that today or not. What's your feelings, guys? Lynn, I think you would ask for this. Or was it Will? Okay.
I think you ought to take it up the next meeting. I mean, it's a fairly complex issue. But we need to have the time to do it right. And personally, that's my 2 cents, and it's 12:30. He's got to go.
Well, yeah, he's got 25 minutes, so.
Somebody trying to do this.
So if that's, we'll do this, and we'll do that at the next meeting. We'll start off with discussion of that. We're going to, and I know we got more on the agenda to do, but I'm just going to summarize for folks so I make sure I'm doing this right. We're going to come back with actual language dealing with the QPs and the broadening of the QPs. We're going to come back with language for the TAR, and then how we're going to deal, what we look at for the TAR simplification and stuff like that. Is that what people are expecting? So, okay, we'll do that, and we'll move on to the agenda again. I guess future deadlines. I just keep putting that on there because we need to keep in mind that we need to have something ready to go by August. So, I think these are some big hurdles that will help us push this along. Then we can just really start hammering.
Comment on that, Jack. When Courtney, I believe her name, made the comment about continuing to have town hall meetings into the fall. I would encourage the industry to have them sooner than that, because really I think, now I understand our timetable, we need to have this kind of buttoned up and written by the fall.
I think part of what she's talking about is there's also rules that have to go along with this.
Sure. Okay.
And so there's going to be as I started stated early on, we're almost going to have this dual track, the law and the rules, because you got to have the one reflect the other, and we want to make sure that the rules are reflective of what people are hearing here, and that is acceptable to the industry.
Okay? And with that, the structural side law package is very, very complicated in depth. We can learn a lot from what you guys have in your law package. Address the issues more in the rule package, get the theory and law supported with rule.
My only point is that we can't keep taking a bite at it and wake up next November, or this coming November, and the legislature's right around the corner.
These are the two big issues. Yep, these are two big issues. So, okay. We'll move on to the item on the agenda, which is called the public, and you're limited to 2 minutes. And items that are of interest or of value to this task force, not other things. If you're going to talk about other things, I'm going to cut you off. So if you have something you want to talk about something that we said today, or if you care to bring up something that you'd like to talk about in the future, now's your opportunity. I am going to limit you to 2 minutes. So anybody who wants to speak, please come forward. Good.
I just, one thing I thought of is we used to have a thing called a registered employee. And I was looking at this certified for 24 months, and the issue keeps coming up about sitting on a couch for 24 months. Maybe it would be certified and employed in the business of pest control.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead.
Dennis Delaney again, representing Cactus and Pine Superintendent Association. One thing I forgot to mention is that other states are often governed under ag for golf courses as well. So a point to be brought out. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Others? Good.
Just a quick question.
Stand up and introduce yourself, please.
Nathan Waters, Cummings, Termite Pest Control. I know that the task force is kind of moving towards allowing the companies to be responsible for the background checks, and that will no longer be the responsibility of the governing body. Are there going to be requirements in place that companies need to follow, so the companies will be responsible for the background checks, but there are requirements, or is it just a free-for-all?
Free-for-all. My understanding of the
Okay. I have a problem with that only because if something happens in the industry to a company, and for example, and I'm thinking in an extreme, but something possible, if we let an individual into the industry that perhaps has a record that would suggest that that individual should not be in the industry, and then is responsible for a home invasion by way of pest control because they were able to get into that home as a trusted vendor, if that happens, that doesn't just reflect badly on that company. I mean, this industry is painted with the same brush. So if something like that happens, and it goes back saying, well, there really are no requirements in the industry, that reflects very, very poorly on the industry as a whole. So at the very least, I urge you to just have some requirements in law that if companies don't meet those requirements and they are audited, then they can potentially be penalized.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Heidi with 5-Star Pest Control. I agree with you. And we could do is a lot of, I don't know, we do background checks via the internet. Maybe when we send in the application, here's also the background check so that you guys have it satisfied. So something easy, kind of bookkeeping for you guys. Because I agree, it should be a requirement. People are going into people's homes. You guys should require the businesses to do it, and we can show proof via paperwork. Just an idea.
Thank you.
So what's your name? I'm Heidi. With you?
Go ahead.
Henry Schneider, International Accommodations. I'm not going to suggest that OPM needs requirements for background checks, but what I would like to suggest is that OPM consider offering a service, an optional service, since the state background check is more thorough than you can usually get from the private sector. Provide a optional service that somebody can request you to do a background check for them. You know, they might also get a private one. They might choose to wait, even if it takes 6 weeks to get one. But it would be, it's probably not going to be a big money maker for the state. But I think the state should at least offer that as an option to have a better quality background check made available.
For a fee?
For a fee.
Yeah.
Yes, for an appropriate fee.
Okay, anyone else? Go ahead.
Norman Conley, Pest Management. And all the things that we've looked at today, and the things that have been looked at in the past, I keep hearing we want to eliminate this, we want to do away with that, we want to remove this. I am in favor of consolidating and streamlining, but I do think that there needs to be a minimum standard established in the things that are done. Whether it's a minimum standard to be a certified applicator or a registered employee or an licensed applicator, a minimum standard to be a qualifying party so that everybody can be judged against the same thing. They met this minimum standard. I'm not hearing a whole lot about what that minimum standard is going to be. I keep hearing that we need to do it, but I'm not hearing this is what it's going to be.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Going once? Twice? Vince, is there something missed?
I just want clarification since we have everyone here, because going back to the initial qualifying party license requirements, we're going to rewrite the language that's currently on here.
We'll put it in the language, so I guess it's the language.
But then we're also creating language that addresses those under the weed control section, correct?
Yes. Okay. We need to set the next meeting. Yeah, the meeting is set for April. I didn't pick that date. Let's see, next month is March, right?
Say that again about April.
April is set for the 18th. The PMAC is set for a certain date, so we're going to try to do this the same date. I think it's PMAC is the 18th.
April 18th?
Yes. And so, can we do want to do today's what? Wednesday, right? You want to do Wednesday again? March 14th?
Yes.
Okay. John? Since you're the longest driver, is that the third Wednesday or the second? It's the second. Perfect. Okay. Let's see, we're down here second. Okay, all right. Well, the next meeting will be at 10 a.m. Wednesday, March 14th, and we're going to have a language drafted for those two sections and perhaps more. We'll see how things go. Okay? Thank you, everybody, for coming. I appreciate you coming, sitting in here and speaking up and voicing your opinion. Thanks.
We've had those points where